The HR Happy Hour Network is proudly sponsored by WorkHuman. The workplace is changing fast, and the leaders who understand what's coming will have the advantage. WorkHuman's annual Trends webinar returns January 29th with research-backed insights on the hottest trends shaping 2026. Discover how top organizations are navigating AI, psychological safety, performance, and equity to outperform their competition. Plus, exclusive findings from McKinsey's Women in the Workplace 2026 report. Featuring an expert panel from McKinsey and WorkHuman, you'll get the intelligence you need to lead with confidence this year. Join the Trends webinar live January 29th at noon Eastern or catch the replay on demand. Register for free at workhuman.com. Welcome to the Outwork in America show. My name's Steve Boese. I'm with Trish Steed. Trish, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. I don't know what it is where you are. How are you?
It is still morning, and Happy New Year.
Are
Good
we
to
still
kick off
saying
the
that?
year. Some new guests and new topics, and
Let's
I'm excited.
call the end of Happy New Year though, right? With that one, please.
Is
Thank
that
you.
it? Really? It's like a week.
I
It's
don't
like a week.
honestly. I don't care about that. Some people get offended with the late Happy New Year. I don't. It doesn't bother me. So yes.
If someone wishes me well, I'm glad for it. So you can tell me at the end of the year, Happy New Year. I'll be excited.
All right, I will. I'm excited for the show today. We're diving into a real hardcore HR topic and people topic, and one we probably should talk about a little bit more, and that's retention, it's engagement, and it's how particularly small, mid-sized businesses can better engage with their people and understand them better. Our guest today is Curtis Forbes. Curtis is the founder and CEO at MustardHub, and I want to learn about that name too, by the way, because that's a cool name. But Curtis, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm great. Happy New Year. Happy New Year to all the people
Hey.
who receive that well.
Yeah, I know. I vow not to be as crabby and that person this year. So I'm accepting.
Okay,
Happy New
I'm
Year.
going to hold you to it.
I'm
Make
not.
note.
For all those other people, I'll just say Happy Wednesday.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. So Curtis, welcome. We mentioned you're the founder and CEO of MustardHub. Let's start with learning a little bit more about you and then MustardHub, of course, because you made a splash at HR Tech this past fall, but some folks probably don't know who you are, and let's learn about that.
Sure. Happy to happy to dial back all the way to the beginning. So I like you said, I'm the founder, CEO of MustardHub. MustardHub is a workforce engagement infrastructure platform. We help companies reduce turnover, strengthen culture, gain predictive insights into employee well-being. A little bit about my background. Goodness, I actually started my career. It's very, we'll say, non-linear. I guess most people don't necessarily have a linear career path. Music. My background is music. I spent about 15 years on the jazz circuit, playing music, teaching music. I started an education company 20 some odd years ago, in music education. And I spent about 20 years scaling that across the country. And during that time, I built a roll-up portfolio of other education businesses as well. And that got me dealing with and working with a lot of people, in a lot of places, very distributed teams, frontline heavy, very, mixed worker classifications, full-time, part-time, contractors. So I got a really heavy dose of that right away. And, so
and your music training, I'm certain, prepared you for people management.
Yeah,
right?
you bet, right? Well, it's funny. So I've always taken, I guess, a very leadership approach. I mean, I was a band leader for a while. I did a lot of my own bookings for a long time. So I wouldn't necessarily say my education prepared me for dealing with people, but when you start to do that a lot and sort of managing what all that entails, with whether it's a big band or a small band, you get a taste of it, right? At least a little bit. So the education didn't prepare me for it, but at least I got it sort of seeded the challenges that I was going to start facing as my organization grew.
Well, I think that's what was fascinating about your story too, is you were a person who was actually in need of something, right,
Yeah.
with your people in all these different capacities that they were working with you. Um, a way to really address keeping them on board, right? Keeping them with you. And I think that anybody listening to the show, from small business all the way up to enterprise scale, we all have that problem. We all have had that struggle, right? Wanting to be able to keep the best people on your team. So I know that was kind of the jumping off point for what you're currently doing. Maybe talk a little bit about that and how you went about just initially solving for some of those problems.
Well, um, y- I think the first, really the first big challenge that I had is actually identifying that there was a problem.
Mm,
And I think that, oftentimes I think in a leadership position, we can be blind to a lot of the things that might be going on within the organization, especially when you work with such distributed teams, right? Those hallway moments don't exist in a lot of times, you know, and it doesn't necessarily matter how big the organization is, but it might matter how the organization is structured, right? If you're small or if you're big, if you're remote, right, or depending on where those touch points are with with the staff that you work with, you might not necessarily know really what's going on. So the first big thing for me was actually identifying that there was a problem. Um, I didn't necessarily, again, I jumped right into a leadership role. I created a company 20 some odd years ago. I was in my 20s. I kind of fell backwards into that without really knowing what I was looking forward to. I didn't have a lot of business training. In fact, the whole story of creating my company is another podcast, and I've actually lectured on that many times. Um, and it was a little bit of a crazy situation. But so throughout the years, really kind of understanding what was going on within my organization, why turnover was happening, both voluntary and involuntary, right? Regrettable and not regrettable, because not all turnover is bad, and not all turnover is preventable, and those are just two facts that we have to accept.
mhm,
Um, but it was really around COVID, when we started to dig in heavily to see how we can change this trend, through a lot of business development planning, strategic planning, and resource planning. You kind of start to, well, we started to understand what these levers are that we could pull to help the organization grow. Um, in the various ways we wanted it to grow, right? So people was obviously the big issue. We vetted a lot of really great, wonderful systems that exist in the marketplace. They didn't really fit the small business model.
mhm,
I grew the small business across the country, but yet each location really operated on its own P&L, right? So
mhm,
every one of them had, and think about it. A lot of today's organizations work like that, right? Whether you're multi-location chain or a franchise or small business or what have you, that's not an uncommon business model.
right.
Um, the
Well,
options out there really didn't fit. So we ended up building technology on top of proprietary tech that we already had built, and it was pretty remarkable what it did for our organization right at jump.
well, I think, even just exploring, I met you in person obviously before, but then also just on your website. I mean, I think what I view it as is a little bit of like operationalizing what HR normally would do maybe in a larger organization and maybe still not getting right. So for example,
Mm,
being able to walk the halls and see, are people
right.
having absenteeism? Are they slowly removing the things off their desk, right? So you can predict when someone's going to leave. So you're right, without some of those physical visual cues of maybe, and you're right, leaders are so busy. You don't always pick up on it, even if you are in the office with someone, right? You don't know. And people are afraid to tell their leaders sometimes what's really going on. So, yeah, I mean, as I was just kind of sifting through all of the abilities that you give these primarily small to mid sized businesses, I mean, these are things that as an HR leader, um, I watched partners in professional services firms struggle with this. I've watched when I was working in healthcare with like frontline, everything from nurses to your food and nutrition workers. You know, it's not sort of a single group that even struggles with this.
No.
So, For me, that's why it was so interesting for you to tackle it, because it
Well,
really could have impact, right? Regardless of industry or size or
and when people talk about retention, I think it gets framed as this HR issue
yeah.
or a labor market issue. But
Mhm.
I think for operators, right, owners or operators, that HR of one, as I
Yeah,
like to refer to them as, like it shows
right.
up in a much more visceral way. I mean, it shows up as constantly, backfilling roles, right?
Mhm.
Managers are stretched thin, teams like that don't quite gel because someone's always new, right? And I think that eventually hits customers, right? I mean, what we consistently see, I think, is that people don't usually leave because of comp alone, right? They leave because of they feel invisible, they feel unsupported, they feel disconnected, right? People, well, I mean, what's the saying, right? People don't leave companies; they leave managers, right?
Right.
That disconnect often builds quietly over time,
I
right?
like that.
The cost isn't just the recruiting fee or the onboarding fee, right? It's the momentum you lose. It's the trust that you lose. Sometimes it's the customers. And that
Right.
was a big problem that we had is that when we had teachers leave or musicians leave, we had customers go with them
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
institutional knowledge, right? All those things that are a little bit more difficult to quantify. Um, also the load that you place on the people who do stay. So
Yeah.
Right.
one person, yeah, I mean, one person leaving can have a ripple, I think, across a team in ways that leaders don't anticipate until it's already happening. And then you're always playing catch up, right? And so to your point about whether you're big or you're small, I mean, different organizations are going to experience it differently, but the pattern is still pretty consistent, right? When people feel unseen for long enough, they
Yeah.
disengage before they exit.
Yeah. There's so many uh, difficult to quantify, as you said, Curtis, costs associated with, regrettable attrition or unwanted higher attrition. And it's not even, I was even thinking about it's kind of what happened to a person for the weeks and months before they decide to separate, right? They're coming to work with a bad attitude, or they're coming to work very disengaged, or they're not being that productive. Maybe they're sort of feeding that out into the environment, right? And other people are kind of taking that in too, right? And look, we all know it happens. We probably all had some jobs in our lives that we didn't love, and we were thinking about the door ourselves. But when it's happening more than you want, more than you can really live with, yeah, the costs are astronomical, and many of them you can't even quantify. But it's such an interesting point. And I guess the other thing I'll say, Curtis, I love your thought on it. Is I know I've heard a lot of people talk about or frame this discussion this way, which is retention, even engagement, is an outcome, right? It's just a result, right? So we shouldn't really talk about it all that much. We should talk about the things on the other side of the equal sign, right? Like whether it's comp, work-life balance, environment, manager-employee relationships, et cetera, et cetera. I'd love your thoughts on that. Like, should folks really think about, hey, let's talk about retention, let's talk about engagement, or should we just look at that as, okay, let's do all these programs and see what happens with our retention and engagement?
Oh, well, I mean, it is an outcome. Um, it should also be a strategy, I think. Um, I often don't see it treated as one.
Mm.
Um, I think that there's a lot of things that go in. Well, I mean, we're dealing with humans, right? We're dealing with humans, and I think that oftentimes we forget that, right? Um, so yes, I mean, is it retention and turnover and things like that certainly are on that, like you said, on that one side of the equal sign, and there's a lot of things that go into what makes something a good experience for somebody, or at least an experience that somebody wants to live with and live within. Um, what's funny is that I think that most organizations already have all of the data they need. I just don't think that they think about it that way. the clock ins, the shift changes, response times, participation, missed handoffs, right? You're talking about all the things on that side of the equal sign, right? These are treated as sort of operational noise, I think. When you step back, though, those behaviors, they tell a story, right? So, someone who is always like reliable maybe starts going quiet, or somebody who's, still performing, but maybe they stop participating, or another person starts actually picking up extra work without being asked. Like, what does that mean, right? And I don't think that these things like mean a lot in isolation.
Yeah.
But when there's patterns that emerge, right, they're often early indicators of something deeper, the burnout, the disengagement, right? Or like on my last example, I think maybe like a readiness for growth, right? Or wanting, more responsibility. I think those things are overlooked, and it's not that there isn't enough, data. I think there's a sort of maybe really a lack of interpretation of this data that they do have. Is that maybe a fair analysis?
Yeah, I think it is. And to me, Curtis, thank you for that. I think that's the really, really interesting part of the story here, which is sifting through or helping organizations make sense of all that data, identifying which of those data points are really predictive of some of these outcomes, and then helping the organization, helping managers and helping leaders with the appropriate, interventions, right? Or at least
Yeah.
awareness, right? To say, hey, so-and-so has clocked in 7 minutes late on his last 4 shifts and previously never was late, right? Maybe whatever it is, right? That to me is a really interesting part of this.
Yeah. So I think what you just said is there's something implicit in what you said. I think that's really, really critical for people to remember and understand, is that predictive analytics doesn't mean predicting the future. Like, nobody has this crystal ball, and we have to remember that. Like, that doesn't exist. And even no amount of AI can predict the future, right? When we talk about predictive analytics, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about recognizing patterns earlier than humans typically do, right? So, I mean, I'm trying to oversimplify it, but purposefully so, because it's not a scary thing, right?
Right.
Especially when managers are too busy, right? Or and they're overseeing a lot of people, right? They already have this enormous mental load that they have to deal with on a regular basis, right? And we don't have the water cooler moments to check in and be like, how are you doing?
Yeah.
So, there's ways to help sort of facilitate this. So if somebody starts missing shifts, I mean, that was a really great example, right? Or they're late, to your example, or they're disengaging from communication, or they're pulling back socially. That doesn't mean they're quitting tomorrow.
Right.
Right.
It means they might need a check-in, or might need support or clarity, right? And on the flip side, like somebody I think who consistently hits goals or takes initiative or supports others, like they might not be a retention risk at all, but they are a growth opportunity, right? And how often are we looking at those kind of signals to tell us that, right? Do we have to wait for a position to open up and then have to go look for people who are, consistently overperforming? Right? Maybe that's not the best strategy right here. So the goal isn't necessarily automation for like automation's sake. It's giving leaders a nudge at the right moment so they can respond like humans, not like spreadsheets, right? And where we were, right, because teams were more distributed, right, we had less informal visibility, than we used to. And I think that the hallway, since those hallway conversations were gone, right, there's a reason they call it quiet quitting now.
Right. Well, I think too, I mean, gosh, so many things are like spinning in my mind of just times where having no technology to help recognize the patterns, you rely on the people. And then if the people aren't recognizing them, it's often too late. So,
Can be.
um, it's fascinating to me to think about, like, what would my work experiences have been like as an HR leader helping my businesses? Because I've worked for really small companies and I've worked for really large ones. And I think the problem is much the same because you're right, people are people. We start seeing people behave in a certain way. Um, Eh, I'll give you an example. I'll try to, like, anonymize it, but, and Steve, you've heard this one before, but when I was working in professional services, I went out on maternity leave, and I was out for 6 months almost. And I had various people, because I was on bed rest in a hospital, various people came to the hospital to resign because they didn't wanna do it to their partner. And so, it was really eye-opening as a younger woman at the time, worker, that I thought, "Why are they not telling their leaders?" So the leaders had no idea these things were going on. When I came back, in fact, someone was being let go. They waited for me to return to do it. The leader did.
Mhm.
Um, and and he was going through a really horrible divorce, but hadn't told anyone. So his performance had changed. And so I guess my point with all of this is with something like Mustard Hub, where you are not just noticing patterns, you're contributing to positive pattern making, right? You're maybe seeing a little bit of something and then having that check in. You're not waiting until you're walking them out the door and going, "Oh, well, yeah, why are you a poor performer?" Right? And they're like, "Oh, I've got these other things going on in my life." So for me personally, I would see using Mustard Hub as that continuous, like, reinforcement that people matter. Their individual experiences are not just within the walls of the work that they're doing, right?
Right. It's about building habits. It's
Yeah.
about building habits. I think that, um, look, companies have values,
Mhm.
and, just like human beings have muscles, right?
Mm.
Right, unless you're constantly exercising them, they will atrophy. And in an organization, it's gonna work the same way, right? If you're not constantly reinforcing that culture, if you're not designing it intentionally, it will get designed for you, whether you like it or not, right? And so I think that part of what we try to do is build a system, is build infrastructure that helps companies build these habits, right? Helps them build that muscle, right? Where they can constantly reinforce their values. And you know, every company is different. All the practices, that they may wish to implement, and use to reinforce those values are going to be different. So the use cases are going to be, excuse me, are going to be unique. Um, and I think that part of our the thoughtful design I think that we put into it
Mhm.
is to allow that, configurable customizability so that we can address all of these use cases because they're going to be different. Right. And the smaller the organization,
Yeah.
sometimes, uh, the more unique the use case might be. The
Mhm.
bigger the organization, right, there's a lot of standard practices, I think, and best
Sure.
practices that get implemented, right? But so yet I think another reason why, um, a lot of the products that were in the marketplace simply didn't work for what we needed at the time because the use case, it didn't support the business model. It didn't support the use case on how we really wanted to implement it. And what we find is that this is a structural limit of a lot of HR and HR adjacent software out there, and vertical SaaS for that matter, is the ability to touch that people and engagement side, right? For platforms that are typically very transactional, right? They don't have the ability to sort of influence these behavioral outcomes under their own brand, right? Which I think is can be an operational limit, but also in some cases a financial liability for them, right? And so part of the reason why we built the infrastructure the way that we did is so that brands can now own that, can embed it in their transactional HR systems and now own this employee engagement life cycle, so that they can deliver that experience to their business customers who need it, who don't get that from, and think about a lot of these small businesses who have a very, kind of fragmented ecosystem of tools that they use. without really able to address this one, I guess, big elephant in the room. Um,
I
so,
guess this goes back to like your background in teaching, right?
mhm.
And educating people. I think that's what I'm hearing is like you're saying, maybe I'm a small business owner and maybe some of the employees are my family, right? So there's a whole nother layer of complexity there. Or maybe, people wear multiple hats and they're responsible for things far beyond maybe the scope of what they've been prepared for. I mean, you yourself saying, yeah, in my 20s, I founded a company and I started learning on the job. I think that describes probably a majority of small businesses, right? We
It
all
sure
jump in.
does.
Steve and I are no different, right? You jump in to start a business because there's a need, but then there's all these other things you really don't even have time to think about. So, what are you hearing from some of your small business owners, for example? Like, how are they reacting to being able to have sort of like this enterprise level experience, but in a smaller company? Are they stepping into it aggressively? Are they a little hesitant? Like, what's the sort of vibe that you're getting right now?
A lot of it depends on the owner and operator. So there are some, you just in those few words described the spectrum, right?
Right.
Um, well, I mean, quite a few are not super tech savvy.
Yeah.
I mean, picture the person who bakes cupcakes who felt like they could do it better than, the company they worked for and decided to open up their own shop, right? Tech isn't their background, people isn't their background, cupcakes are their background, right?
Right.
And they
I wish that
realize
was
that
my background.
yeah, right, exactly. Um, they r they realize though that they need to get a handle on working with people and they need to do it quickly, right? And then there's the very entrepreneurial, tech savvy. I mean, you have the whole other side of that spectrum who are constantly looking for new tools to make their business better. So I see both,
Mhm.
both, but I will say, I mean, both have the same questions, right?
Yeah.
I want to know who's a flight risk and
Right.
when. What's it going to cost if I lose them? What's going to cost me to keep them? Is there a value comparison? How do I make that best decision, right? Is there an intervention window? And what does that even look like, right? Um, how can I give this person something without breaking the bank that's going to
Mhm.
make them feel good about being here and not want to leave and not want to take 50 cents more, a dollar more, $5 more to go down the street, right?
Agree.
Because we're building something really special and really unique here, right? And so um, the questions are the same. Um, the open-mindedness might be there might be a wide scope of that.
Right.
Um, So I think that there tends to be a little bit of a learning curve, right? For the folks who are less familiar with technology, I think becoming a mature user on the platform might take a little bit longer. That's
Mhm.
generally what I'm seeing, but I think that the benefits become clear pretty quickly. One thing to like be clear about. I mean, I don't think technology fixes culture.
No.
It never has, right? I think that what it can do, it can make culture visible, right? It
Mhm.
can
Yeah.
we talk about reinforcing habits. I think it helps managers notice what they'd otherwise miss. So, like, when we talk about the folks who are quick to, adopt it and use it and see that value versus those that don't, I mean, I think that that's the trajectories when they start to notice those things that they were missing before, the visibility into their culture.
Mhm.
Um, I think recognition still has to be genuine, like, the conversations still have to happen, trust has to
Sure.
be built, every interaction at a time, so to speak. And I think the healthiest teams use the technology as their support system, right? Not not to substitute
Right.
for it. But I mean, the feedback has been fantastic. We've had companies who have cut 2 to 3, their turnover by 2 to 3x by 180 days, and that's about average what we're seeing,
Mhm.
which is pretty remarkable, right? Especially when we talk about a lot of frontline industries that have distributed teams that are primarily deskless workers. When you
Mhm.
think about these types of verticals, you're looking at companies that experience turnover that it's over 100% annually,
Oh, yeah.
right? When you see that kind of change, um, I mean, right, all of the sudden it becomes a strategy, right? Because it's putting dollars back in your pocket, and it's not a little bit of dollars. That's a lot of bit of dollars.
Mhm.
Right, right. No, I'm glad we're talking about the dollars part now. So one of the questions that I would have then if I'm, say, a small, even maybe a little bit approaching mid-sized company, um, if I want to start and work with you now, I know you have a tiered sort of system of how that works. Can you maybe talk a little bit about that so people can understand maybe how easy it is to get started with you all in this endeavor?
So we do have a freemium model. We,
Mhm.
encourage an organization, sign up for free, add your entire census of members for free. All of the core engagement features are free to use, right? Organizations still have to purchase points.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Work like, the conversion is very much like credit card points. You buy 100 points for $1. There's no minimums. There's no per user minimums. There's no per user per month fees, right? Um, we want 100% of the dollars to go straight to your people. And that's the point, right?
Yeah.
Especially with small businesses, right? Not to burden them with, platform fees and
Mhm.
per user per month fees and per user minimums and 3-year contracts and 4 to 8 week lead times. I mean, this is what you see. And look, I'm not disparaging any of the software that's out there. It's wonderful. It's exceptional. It's designed for enterprise,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And all the
Right.
business models are for all the entrants in our market are that. They're
Yeah.
just they're trying to sell to small businesses by competing on price, but it's the infrastructure of that and the mechanics of the model that don't work for small businesses, not necessarily the price, right? So that's why we've done what we've done.
Mhm.
100% of your spend can go directly to your people. And the managers can use it for top-down recognition, for peer-to-peer recognition. They rack up points via a variety of different behavioral incentives that work on the platform and sort of gamified mechanics, right? And they can redeem those in the marketplace for, countless benefits that are meaningful to them.
Mhm.
That's part of the beauty of that. Companies can upgrade their subscription tier for a bunch of different things. We have one level that can include a lot of like more customization options, network level structuring. This is how MustardHub scales across large organizations, right? That may want siloed accounts, throughout their organization, or franchise systems, private equity can link accounts through a network system and provide parent level visibility
Mhm.
without interrupting those organizational boundaries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they can upgrade again for our predictive insights and integrations and over 280 software systems as well. So
Mhm.
that tends to drive a
Yeah.
lot of the value, being able to see those things,
Well, I like
and
that
get
you
those.
can start out. There's no reason not to start out,
No,
right? Like if it's free, give it a shot, right? And it sounds like you are there to grow as they grow,
that's right.
right? And help them give I still go back to that, giving them insights on things that even even a seasoned HR professional, if you had one, might not think are correlated.
Mhm.
Right? So a lot of things you talked about at the beginning were things that and Steve, some that you mentioned, I mean, these are things that as seasoned business leaders, we might not put those dots together, but seen more holistically with you all, it's gonna make a big difference in how they manage.
Yeah, and the goal the goal is to make it kind of like a flywheel, right? Obviously, a manager or an account owner will have to set it up, but then that it kind of
Sure.
runs on its own. Once it's activated, it runs. You're building those habits, just kind of like we talked about, right? So there's not
Yeah.
necessarily this sort of it doesn't require this overly managed initiative,
Mhm.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And for owner operators of small businesses and medium sized businesses, we're already burdened with too much to do.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. I think I need MustardHub. I need some recognition.
I'll tell you what, for sure. I mean, that's the most compelling argument as well, right? We've been in small
Right?
businesses for a long time, and yeah, and we're pretty tech savvy too. And I was
Yeah.
wrestling with technology, two different technologies yesterday to do stuff that we have
Mhm.
to do in our small organization. So to think, oh, let's get another piece of
Yeah.
technology that I've got to struggle with, it's very daunting for sure. And we're in the tech business, sort of, right? Like, and so, yeah, that cupcake shop owner, yeah, I feel their pain for sure. I don't know how you would approach things like very complex technologies. You just wouldn't. You wouldn't have the bandwidth, I don't
Right.
think.
Well, and Steve, I think too, like even just using us as an example, I mean, with just a couple employees and the two of us, it's like if Steve, like not too long ago, Steve sent me a message, like recognizing something I had worked on, like it meant the world to me that he took time to do that. And sometimes we get busy, we don't think of those things. It really does matter, right?
Yeah.
So having a mechanism to make that easier, because I'm not doing that enough, right? So I know other business owners aren't doing it enough either. And it's not because it's not true. It's not because these people who work for you aren't doing a great job. Just, oh my gosh, you're just buried under all the administration that it takes to run a company.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, it's definitely valuable. Definitely worth it. We'll have to look into it for ourselves, Steve.
I love it. Look, I mean, if there's one takeaway, engagement doesn't disappear overnight, but neither does burnout, right? Both of them leave
Mm.
signals, right? There's a trail there. Organizations that do well are the ones that notice earlier and respond with humanity, right? Not policy,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm. Curtis, this has been a really fun conversation. I'm glad we were able to spend a little time together today. I did not get a chance to ask you where the mustard comes from. Are you just you're just a fan of the condiment, or
Fascinated with
were there
condiments.
other
No,
condiments that you considered, or tell us about that real quick?
no. So, as you know, right, part of the origin story came from the organization that I was working with, where we had such a diverse group of worker classifications, many of which were also independent contractors, part-time workers. And, the idea here, and I'll add, as independent contractors, right, there's this inherent misalignment with the organization, right, just simply based on that worker classification, not able to take advantage of different benefit structures and things like that. Which is hard, which is really hard, and it even makes it more difficult to get groups like that to really, I think, feel and internalize that company culture, right? When there is that inherent misalignment and
Mhm.
disconnection. Mustard seed is one of the smallest seeds that exists in nature. It grows into one of the biggest plants.
Okay.
It's this idea that no matter how small or disconnected you feel, right, you can still grow into something, right?
Dig
You
that.
can. There is still that opportunity to grow and to be connected to the larger, the bigger picture, the bigger mission, the bigger vision, right? That bigger organization. That's kind of. I know that some people have alluded to. I think that there is like some religious connotation. It didn't necessarily come from that,
Okay.
but more from this, I think, very organic sense, right? That in nature, no matter how small you feel, right, you can still be part of something bigger and be connected to it. And it's a hub for everyone, right? Regardless of whether you're C-suite, the janitor, or just a 2 hour a month contractor,
Yeah.
right? This is
I
why we
love
don't
that.
have per user per month fees, right?
Yeah.
Add your whole census because everybody's part of it.
Yeah.
I love that. That makes total sense.
Great stuff. Curtis, thank you for sharing that. And Curtis, where can we direct folks to learn more about Mustard Hub, maybe connect with you and the team there?
Sure. Mustardhub.com. They can go on the web. They can find us there at mustardhub.com. And they can, excuse me, they can reach us at info@mustardhub.com is a great way to reach out to the organization. My personal email, curtis@mustardhub.com. I do invite folks to reach out. We're still, no matter how big we get, I'm still in founder mode, and I love to hear from
Love
people
it.
who are existing or potential customers for what they need, want, feel. So I love feedback.
Awesome. Curtis, thank you so
Also,
much.
can I add really quickly, because you didn't mention it, you have the behind the build and from the front lines video series that you do, which is fantastic. So, as a former HR leader, I was always looking for sort of free ways to train my team. So,
Mm-hmm.
whether you're a small business owner or someone who has a team of any size, really, I would steer them to those to
Yeah. So,
learn
and
a
I'll
lot.
I'll quickly touch on those. Mustard Hub Behind the Build really gets implicit perspectives on people management through the lens of the work of those who are building and backing really the infrastructure behind better workplaces, right? Think about the different platforms, right? Brokers, consultants, platforms, investors, right? Everybody really who's building and backing the infrastructure behind better workplaces and getting their, like I said, that implicit perspective on people management through the lens of their work. From the Front Lines is a really great series for the actual practitioners, the boots on the ground, those folks who are actually doing it, who are in the weeds and want to talk about those stories. And it's pretty incredible to get those two different perspectives, right? On people management, on the things that work, what good leadership looks like, what good leadership doesn't look like. Sometimes the best advice comes from the stories about what didn't work.
Right.
So definitely check those out if you get an opportunity.
Yeah, I've watched several of each and I've learned something new from each one. So even if you just listen and you walk away with one new thing you can do, to me that's a win. So, yeah,
Cool.
thanks for coming on the show.
I appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for having me here.
Thank you, Curtis, as well. MustardHub.com, as Curtis said. Trish, this was super fun. Thank you for organizing this. You connected with Curtis back at HR Tech and made this happen for us, so thank you.
I did.
Reminder, go to hrhappyhour.net for all the network show archives. Subscribe, tell a friend, all of that. Thank you so much. And Trish, for our guest, Curtis Forbes, I'm Steve Boese. We will see you next time. Bye for now.